Downing Street spokeswoman said Sakir had told Masoud Pezeshkian, who's seen as a reformer and has been in office for less than a month, that such an attack would carry a serious risk of miscalculation and not be in anyone's interests. Iran blames Israel for killing the Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran last month and has threatened to retaliate. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied involvement in that incident or the killing of a senior Hezbollah commander in Beirut. The White House National Security Advisor John Kirby has warned that retaliation may come this week.
We have been continually speaking to our Israeli counterparts and other counterparts in the region. It is why President Biden spent a little bit of time this morning speaking to his counterparts from the UK and France, from Germany and Italy, to send a strong message that we don't want to see any rise in violence.
The office of Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has heavily criticized the country's defense minister for saying talk of a total victory over Hamas was nonsense. A statement said Yoav Gallant had adopted an anti-Israeli narrative, and his comments had harmed the chances of a deal to release hostages being held in Gaza. From Jerusalem, Bora Davis reports.
Appearing before the Knesset's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, Yoav Gallant suggested enough progress had been made on the battlefield against Hamas to achieve a peace deal and secure the release of the remaining hostages being held in Gaza. The defense minister added that Israel was at a crossroads and that talk of a total victory against Hamas was nonsense. The Prime Minister's office responded, publicly accusing Mr. Gallant of adopting an anti-Israeli narrative which harmed the chances of reaching a deal for the release of the hostages.
Police in Bangladesh are returning to work, ending a strike that began last week when the former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was ousted. Officers have reported for duty at hundreds of police stations across the country. They had demanded safety guarantees after dozens were killed in retaliation for their use of force in quelling anti-government protests. More than 40 officers were killed in the violence. The Venezuelan government says that 25 people have died in protests since the contested presidential elections were held 2 weeks ago. Almost 200 others have been injured. President Nicolás Maduro has accused opposition leaders of financing and organizing the attacks and has urged the justice system to use an iron fist against them. UN and human rights groups have reported a similar number of victims, but have blamed Venezuela's security forces for most of the violence. President Macron has urged France to retain the spirit of unity forged during the Olympic Games, which ended in Paris last night. Speaking to an audience of volunteers and officials in the French capital, Mr. Macron described the Games as a triumph that had proved the doubters wrong. He said people didn't want life to go back to normal. Five-time Olympic medalist Tom Daley arrived back in the UK today and announced that he was retiring from diving. A Team GB mainstay, his first Olympics was back in 2008.
I just think it's always hard when you say goodbye to your sport. Lots of things to protest, but, you know, I think it's the right time. Like, this year felt like such a bonus, and I got to compete in front of my family, my kids. Yeah, bucket list ticked off on every occasion.
Daley was among dozens of athletes from Team GB to arrive at St Pancras Station in London to cheers and applause. They won 65 medals, one more than at the Games in Tokyo, but with many fewer golds overall.
Thanks, Chris. You're listening to The World Tonight with James Demarison. After months of being on the back foot in its war against Russia, Ukraine finds itself very much on the offensive tonight. Almost a week into its biggest cross-border military incursion since the war began, Ukrainian forces claim they are continuing to gain ground. The country's top military commander has told President Zelensky they now control 1,000 square kilometers of the southwestern Russian region of Kursk. Thousands of people have also been evacuated from the neighboring Russian region of Belgorod, where the sounds of war could be heard this morning. Well, with the conflict coming to Russian soil, President Putin has been hearing about its impact at first hand, and there was a telling moment today when he appeared to display a degree of frustration, as our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg recounted. Mr. Putin was being briefed on how much territory the Ukrainians had taken.
The Kursk government told President Putin that now Ukrainians controlled 28 settlements in his region and had advanced 7 miles from the border. The president cut him off.
Это военное ведомство вам доложит, какая там ширина и глубина.
Leave the numbers to the military, he told him.
But there were other equally unwelcome numbers provided by that governor. 120,000 Russian citizens evacuated from their homes in the Kursk region, 2,000 still in areas occupied by Ukrainian forces, their fate unknown. Well, tonight in Kiev, the man who ordered the incursion, President Zelensky, spelled out the overall aim of the operation, if not its specific goals.
Цілком справедливо знищувати російських терористів там.
It is entirely justified to destroy Russian terrorists wherever they are, wherever they launch their attacks from. Russian military airfields, Russian logistics. We see the benefits this can bring in bringing peace closer. Russia needs to be forced into peace, especially if Putin is so set on fighting.
Так хоче й далі воювати.
Christopher Miller of the Financial Times has been to Sumy, that's the region of Ukraine which borders Kursk, just a little further to the south, and he's been speaking to Ukrainian soldiers who've taken part in the operation in Russia. So,